There was a time when a husband understood that his wife's appearance was not material for a cruel joke. Marriage gave people access to each other's private fears. A husband might know which part of the mirror his wife avoided. A wife might know which insecurity her husband covered with confidence. That knowledge was supposed to create safety. It was never supposed to become a weapon. But on one unforgettable afternoon, a husband named Anthony Reynolds forgot that lesson in front of hundreds of people. The Family Feud studio was bright and full of energy. Music played as Steve Harvey walked onto the stage. The audience stood, clapped, and cheered while two families smiled behind their podiums. On one side stood the Turner family from Alabama. On the other stood the Reynolds family from Jacksonville, Florida. Anthony Reynolds stood in the captain's position. He was 50 years old and owned 2 fitness centers. He wore a fitted charcoal suit, a white shirt, and a bright red tie. He stood with the confidence of a man who paid close attention to how he looked. Beside him stood his wife, Elena. Elena was 47 years old. She wore a dark green dress with long sleeves. Her brown hair fell softly over the left side of her face. A pale scar began near her right temple and continued toward her jaw. It was not the first thing most people noticed. Elena had warm eyes and a gentle smile, but Anthony had spent years making sure she noticed the scar before anything else. Their 20-year-old daughter, Sophia, stood next to Elena. Anthony's older sister, Michelle, and Elena's younger brother, Luis, completed the team. Steve began the introductions. He spoke with Anthony first. "What do you do, sir?" "I own 2 fitness centers." Steve looked at Anthony's suit. "I can tell you spend some time in one of them." Anthony smiled and adjusted his jacket. "I have to represent the brand." The audience laughed. Steve moved toward Elena. "And what do you do?" "I manage a community food program." "What kind of program?" "We prepare meals for older people and families going through medical emergencies." The audience applauded. Steve nodded. "That sounds like important work." "It is." Steve noticed her hair covering part of her face. "That is a beautiful dress." "Thank you." Before Elena could say anything more, Anthony leaned toward his microphone. She spent 3 hours choosing it. Elena gave him a quick look. Anthony continued. "She knows the cameras are unforgiving." A few people laughed politely. Steve looked toward him. "What does that mean?" Anthony smiled. "My wife is very careful about angles." Elena's face became tense. Sophia whispered, "Dad." Anthony ignored her. Steve looked back at Elena. "You like the dress?" "Yes, that is what matters." The game began. For the first few rounds, the Reynolds family performed well. Then Steve asked them to name something people check before taking a photograph. Elena answered, "Their hair." The answer appeared on the board. Anthony laughed loudly. "Trust me, Steve, she checks a lot more than her hair." The audience became quieter. Steve looked at him. "What else does she check?" Anthony pointed toward the right side of his own face. "She has to make sure the camera catches her good side." Elena looked down. Steve's expression changed. "Brother, you might want to stop." Anthony raised his hands as if the comment were harmless. "I am only joking." The family continued playing. A few minutes later, Elena missed an answer. Anthony rolled his eyes. She gets nervous when people look at her too long. Elena looked at him. "Please stop." Anthony leaned closer to his microphone. She was a lot more confident before the accident. The studio became silent. Sophia's face hardened. Michelle looked at her brother in disbelief. Steve slowly lowered his question card. Anthony could have stopped. Instead, he continued. "You should have seen her 20 years ago. She was the beautiful one in the family." Elena's eyes filled with tears. Anthony laughed. "Now she makes me stand on her right side in every picture so people do not see the scar." Nobody in the audience laughed with him. Elena turned away from the cameras. She raised one hand to cover the side of her face. Steve placed his cards on the podium. He walked toward Anthony. "What are you doing?" Anthony's smile disappeared. "What? You are humiliating your wife." "I am not humiliating her. She knows I joke." Steve looked toward Elena. She does not look like she is enjoying the joke. Elena wiped her eyes. I'm all right, Steve shook his head. You do not have to protect him right now. Anthony became defensive. This is getting too serious. Steve pointed toward Elena. You made it serious when you used something she cannot change to embarrass her. Anthony looked around the studio. It is just a scar. Elena closed her eyes. Sophia stepped forward. No, Dad. It is the scar she got saving us. The audience reacted with shock. Steve slowly turned toward Sophia. What did you say? Sophia looked at her mother. Elena shook her head. Sophia, you do not have to. Yes, I do. Sophia looked directly at Steve. My mother got that scar pulling me and my father out of a burning car. The studio became completely silent. Anthony stared at his daughter. Sophia, you never tell that part. Steve looked at Anthony, then at Elena. A moment earlier, Anthony had described his wife's scar as an embarrassing flaw. Now the entire audience was about to learn what it represented. Elena had not lost part of her beauty in that accident. She had risked her life to save the people she loved. And before the show ended, Steve Harvey would make Anthony face a question he had avoided for 18 years. How could a man mock the mark left by the moment his wife chose his life over her own safety? Elena Morales met Anthony Reynolds when she was 23 years old. At the time, Elena worked in the kitchen of a hospital while studying nutrition at night. She grew up in a close Puerto Rican family. Her father drove delivery trucks. Her mother prepared meals for neighbors recovering from illness, surgery, or childbirth. The Morales family did not have much money, but food was always used to make people feel cared for. If someone in the neighborhood became sick, Elena's mother prepared soup. If a family lost a relative, she filled their refrigerator. If an older neighbor could not cook, she sent Elena to deliver a warm plate. Her mother often said, "A meal cannot solve every problem, but it can remind someone that they are not facing the problem alone." Elena carried that lesson into adulthood. She was intelligent, practical, and quietly confident. She also loved dancing. On weekends, she attended local salsa events with her cousins. That was where she met Anthony. Anthony was handsome, charming, and competitive. He played college football for 2 years before a knee injury ended his athletic plans. After leaving school, he worked as a personal trainer. He dreamed of owning a fitness center. When he saw Elena dancing, he immediately asked one of her cousins to introduce them. Elena initially found him too confident. Anthony found her refusal to be impressed attractive. Their relationship developed quickly. Anthony admired Elena's discipline. She worked full-time, attended classes, helped her family, and still found energy to dance. Elena admired Anthony's ambition. He had suffered a major disappointment but refused to give up on himself. They married 2 years later. During the early years, Anthony did not mock Elena's appearance. He praised it constantly. He told friends he had married the most beautiful woman in Jacksonville. He liked the attention they received when they entered restaurants together. He often introduced Elena before mentioning anything about himself. "This is my wife," he would say proudly. Elena sometimes teased him. "You talk about me like I am one of your achievements." Anthony would laugh. "Marrying you was my greatest achievement." Their daughter Sophia was born 3 years after the wedding. Anthony adored her. Elena reduced her working hours to care for the baby, but she continued her education. When Sophia started school, Elena completed her nutrition degree and began managing food services for a senior center. Anthony continued working as a trainer. He wanted to open his own gym, but he did not have enough money. Elena encouraged him to begin slowly. She helped him rent a small space. She created meal plans for clients. She managed the early accounts. She used $6,000 from her savings to help purchase equipment. For the first year, the gym barely earned enough to cover expenses. Elena's salary paid most of the household bills. She never reminded Anthony of that during arguments. She believed they were building something together. Their life was not perfect, but it was stable. Then, 18 years before their Family Feud appearance, everything changed. Sophia was 2 years old. The family was driving home from Elena's parents' house late one evening. Rain had begun falling. Anthony was behind the wheel. A pickup truck crossed the center line. The other driver had been drinking. Anthony tried to avoid the truck, but the vehicles collided. The Reynolds family's car spun across the road and struck a barrier. Anthony's leg was trapped beneath the dashboard. Sophia was secured in her child's seat in the back. Elena's head struck the passenger side window. The glass cut deeply into the right side of her face. For several seconds, she was disoriented. Then, she smelled smoke. The engine compartment had caught fire. Elena turned toward Sophia. Her daughter was screaming. Anthony was conscious but unable to move his leg. "Get Sophia," he shouted. Elena tried to open her door. It was crushed. She climbed between the seats while blood ran down the side of her face. The rear door would not open. She released Sophia from the car seat and attempted to break the window with her elbow. It did not break. She searched the floor and found a metal flashlight. She struck the glass repeatedly until it shattered. Elena pushed Sophia through the opening to a man who had stopped on the road. She could have climbed out next. The fire was spreading. Smoke filled the car, but Anthony remained trapped. Elena returned to the front seat. She pulled at the metal around his leg. It would not move. A second driver arrived with a tool from his truck. Together, they forced part of the dashboard upward. Anthony screamed as Elena pulled him free. She helped push him through the broken window. Only then did Elena climb out. Seconds later, flames spread through the front of the car. Emergency crews arrived soon afterward. Anthony suffered a broken leg, damage to his knee, and several fractured ribs. Sophia had bruising but no serious injuries. Elena's injuries were more complicated. Glass had cut through nerves and muscles on the right side of her face. She also suffered burns on her shoulder and arm. Doctors performed emergency surgery. The wounds healed, but the scar remained. Some nerves never fully recovered. When Elena smiled, the right side of her mouth moved slightly differently. She spent months in treatment. During the first weeks, Anthony was grateful. He told everyone Elena had saved them. He cried beside her hospital bed. "You went back for me," he said. "Of course I did. You could have died. So could you." Anthony promised he would never forget what she had done. But as the years passed, he began remembering the accident differently. He focused on his own injury and recovery. His knee never returned to its former strength. He could no longer demonstrate every exercise for clients. He felt as if the crash had taken something important from him. Elena was also struggling. She avoided mirrors. She did not want photographs taken. She covered the scar with makeup and hair. When strangers stared, she became uncomfortable. Anthony initially reassured her. "You are still beautiful," but he did not understand why one sentence did not remove her insecurity. When Elena declined invitations, he became frustrated. When she avoided dancing, he complained. "You cannot let the accident control your whole life." Elena tried to explain that she no longer felt comfortable when people looked at her. Anthony interpreted her pain as rejection. He wanted the confident woman he had married to return immediately. He did not understand that recovery was not a straight road. Elena attended therapy. She joined a support group for people living with visible scars. Slowly, she rebuilt her confidence. She stopped using heavy makeup every day. She returned to work. She danced at home with Sophia. But Anthony's behavior began changing. He made small comments. "You looked younger with your hair pulled back, but I understand why you do not wear it that way. Try standing on this side for the picture. That lighting makes the scar look worse." He claimed he was helping. Elena felt as though she was being inspected. When she told him the comments hurt, Anthony became defensive. "I am the one person who can be honest with you. Honesty is not supposed to make me afraid to be seen. You are too sensitive." The comments became jokes around relatives. Anthony sometimes compared old photographs with new ones. "This was before life attacked us," he would say. Everyone assumed he was referring to the accident generally. Elena understood the hidden message. The photograph showed the woman he preferred. Meanwhile, Anthony's business expanded. Elena continued helping. She developed nutrition programs for gym members. She prepared healthy meal guides. She handled customer questions. Her ideas helped the fitness center attract older clients and people recovering from medical treatment. When the first location became successful, Anthony opened a second. He began appearing in local advertisements. His social media pages focused heavily on physical transformation. Before and after photographs became central to the brand. Anthony started judging people's appearance more openly. He commented on weight, clothing, hair, and age. At home, he encouraged Elena to consider cosmetic procedures. She consulted 2 surgeons. Both explained that more surgery could create new complications and might not produce the result she wanted. Elena decided against it. Anthony said he supported the decision. Then, during arguments, he sometimes mentioned the money he would have paid to fix things. Elena stopped discussing the scar with him. Sophia saw more than her parents realized. She noticed her mother leaving family photographs. She noticed Anthony telling Elena which side to stand on. She noticed Elena checking restaurant lighting before sitting down. When Sophia was 14, she confronted her father. "Why do you always talk about Mom's face?" Anthony laughed. "I do not. You do. Your mother knows I think she is beautiful. Then why do you keep reminding her about the scar?" Anthony became irritated. "You are too young to understand marriage." Sophia replied, "I understand when someone looks hurt." The conversation changed nothing. Elena continued working and helping others. She eventually moved from the senior center into a larger community food organization. Her team prepared meals for older adults, cancer patients, people recovering from surgery, and families staying near hospitals. Elena understood how quickly a medical emergency could damage a family's stability. She coordinated volunteers and donations. She also trained staff to speak respectfully with people whose illnesses or injuries had changed their appearance. One woman receiving meals had lost her hair during chemotherapy. Another had burns across her neck. A man recovering from a stroke had facial paralysis. Elena never looked away from them. She knew what it felt like when another person stared only at the visible difference. Her work became deeply meaningful. She began speaking publicly about dignity after injury. At first, she stood with her hair covering the scar. Over time, she moved it back. She was still nervous, but she wanted people in her support groups to see that confidence could return without pretending the scar did not exist. 6 months before the Family Feud recording, Elena received an award from a local hospital. The award recognized her service to families facing medical crises. During the ceremony, the presenter mentioned the accident and Elena's rescue of Anthony and Sophia. Anthony sat in the audience. People praised Elena's bravery. Afterward, he became unusually quiet. In the car, Elena asked what was wrong. "Nothing, you seem upset." "I am tired of hearing that story." Elena stared at him. "What do you mean? People act like you did everything. I pulled both of you out." "I know." "Then what is the problem?" "I survived too." Elena looked at him in disbelief. "Nobody said you didn't. But every time the story is told, I am the helpless man trapped in the car." "You were trapped." Anthony's face hardened. "You enjoy that part." Elena felt as if he had struck her. "You think I enjoy remembering that night?" "You enjoy being called a hero." Elena turned toward the window. She finally understood something. Anthony's jokes were not only about her appearance, they were also about his shame. Every time he saw the scar, he remembered that Elena had saved him. Instead of honoring the reminder, he had begun resenting it. When Sophia submitted the family's Family Feud application, she described Elena as the strongest person she knew. Anthony agreed to participate because he wanted publicity for his fitness centers. Elena agreed because she hoped the experience would bring the family closer. On the morning of the recording, she stood in the hotel bathroom, deciding how to wear her hair. Sophia entered. "Wear it back." Elena looked into the mirror. "The studio lights are strong. You do not have to hide." Elena touched the scar. "I know." But she let her hair fall forward again. She was not afraid of the audience. She was afraid of the man standing beside her, making her feel ashamed. The first round began with laughter. Steve asked contestants to name something people try to improve before a school reunion. Anthony reached the buzzer first. Their body. It was the #1 answer. The Reynolds family chose to play. Sophia answered career. Michelle answered clothes. Luis answered hair. All appeared on the board. Steve reached Elena. Something people improve before a school reunion. Their confidence. The bell rang. The answer appeared. Steve nodded. That is a good answer. Anthony laughed. She has been working on that one for 18 years. Elena looked at him. The audience became quieter. Steve asked, why 18 years? Anthony waved his hand. Long story. Elena answered, we were in a car accident. Steve looked toward her scar. He understood that the story might be personal. I'm sorry to hear that. We survived. Anthony added, some of us recovered faster than others. Sophia shook her head. Dad, Steve's expression tightened. The round continued. The Reynolds family won. During the second round, the question was, name something people do before taking a photograph. The opposing family won control, but received 3 strikes. The Reynolds family had a chance to steal. Sophia suggested fix their hair. Michelle said check their smile. Luis suggested stand up straight. Elena said choose a good angle. Anthony immediately laughed. That is definitely her answer. Elena became tense. The family used fix their hair. It was on the board, and they stole the points. As everyone celebrated, Anthony continued. She spends more time planning pictures than planning vacations. Steve looked at him. What does she plan? Anthony pointed toward the right side of his face. She has to make sure the camera catches the good side. Elena lowered her eyes. Steve said, brother, you might want to stop. Anthony smiled. She knows I joke. Elena whispered, please stop. The microphone caught it. Steve looked directly at Anthony. She asked you to stop. Anthony raised his hands. All right. But he looked irritated rather than sorry. The third round was worth double points. Steve asked, name something a person might hide because they feel embarrassed. The Reynolds family gained control. Sophia answered debt. Michelle answered their age. Luis answered a mistake. All appeared on the board. Steve reached Elena. She hesitated. A scar. The board rang. It was the number 2 answer. The audience applauded. Elena smiled faintly. Anthony leaned toward his microphone. That answer came from experience. Steve immediately turned. I thought you agreed to stop. I am not insulting her. She said it herself. Elena looked at him. I answered the question, and I explained why. Nobody asked you to. The audience reacted. Anthony's face became hard. You do not need to get an attitude. Steve stepped closer. She is not giving you an attitude. She is asking for respect. Anthony laughed. Everybody is acting like I called her ugly. The studio became quiet. Elena's face changed. Steve said, nobody used that word except you. Anthony realized his mistake. He tried to laugh it away. I am saying, I did not call her that. Sophia stared at him. You have. Anthony turned toward her. When? At home. Elena closed her eyes. Anthony's expression became defensive. I have never called your mother ugly. You said she would be beautiful again if she had another surgery. That is not the same. Elena looked at him. It felt the same. Anthony shook his head. I offered to help. I did not ask to be fixed. The audience applauded. Anthony looked toward Steve. You do not understand. She was different before the accident. Steve replied, everybody is different after surviving something. She used to be confident. Elena said, you used to make me feel safe. The studio became silent. Anthony stared at her. Before he could answer, Steve resumed the game. The family received 1 strike. Then Luis gave a wrong answer. The second strike appeared. Steve returned to Anthony. Name something a person might hide because they feel embarrassed. Anthony answered, their weight. The board rang. The answer appeared. Anthony pointed toward the board as if he had proven something. Steve moved to Elena. Only 1 answer remained. She thought carefully. The truth. The buzzer sounded. Third strike. The opposing family had a chance to steal. They answered a health problem. It was correct. The Reynolds family lost the round. Anthony became angry. He looked at Elena. The truth? What kind of answer was that? It was my answer. You cost us the round. We already had 2 strikes. You could have chosen something normal. Steve said, brother, it is a game. Anthony ignored him. You get nervous when people look at you too long. Elena stared at him. That has nothing to do with my answer. Anthony laughed. She was a lot more confident before the accident. Steve lowered his question card. That is enough. Anthony continued. You should have seen her 20 years ago. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She was the beautiful one in the family. Nobody laughed. Anthony pointed toward Elena's hair. Now she makes me stand on her right side in every picture so people do not see the scar. Elena turned away. She covered the side of her face. Sophia immediately moved beside her. Michelle looked at Anthony. What is wrong with you? Anthony's voice became defensive. I am frustrated. Luis stepped forward. So you attack her face? I did not attack anything. Steve placed his cards down. He walked toward Anthony. What are you doing? I made a joke. Your wife is crying. She is sensitive about the scar. Then why would you joke about it? Anthony had no good answer. Instead, he shrugged. It is just a scar. Sophia turned toward him. No, Dad, it is the scar she got saving us. The audience gasped. Anthony stared at her. Sophia, stop. She did not. You always tell the story like the emergency workers saved everyone. They did. After Mom pulled us out. Steve looked at Elena. Is that true? Elena wiped her face. There were people on the road who helped. That is not what he asked, Sophia said. Elena looked at her daughter. Sophia's voice began to shake. You broke the window. Elena said nothing. You got me out. The studio became completely silent. And then you went back for Dad. Anthony stepped toward Sophia. You were 2. You do not remember. I know because Uncle Luis showed me the newspaper article. Anthony looked toward Luis. You had no right. Luis crossed his arms. She had a right to know what her mother did. Steve looked at Luis. Newspaper article? Luis reached into his jacket and removed a folded page. I brought a copy. Elena stared at him. Why? Because Anthony has spent years acting like your scar is something shameful. Luis handed the page to Steve. It was an old newspaper article. The headline read, A photograph showed a much younger Elena in a hospital bed. The right side of her face was covered with bandages. Steve read part of the article silently. Then he looked at Elena. You broke a window and got your daughter out? Elena nodded. And then you returned for your husband? He was trapped. Steve looked at Anthony. The woman you just mocked went back into a burning car for you? Anthony's confidence disappeared. There were other people helping. Steve looked back at the article. It says she remained inside until the dashboard was lifted. Anthony said nothing. Michelle stepped forward. She also delayed part of her own treatment because Anthony was struggling. Elena looked at her. Michelle, her sister-in-law, continued. He could not walk for months. Anthony shook his head. I recovered. With Elena helping you, Michelle replied. The audience applauded. She drove you to therapy after her own appointments. She managed your medication. She helped you bathe when you could not stand. Anthony's face became red. That is private. Elena looked at him. So is my scar. The audience erupted. Steve allowed the applause to continue. Then he looked at Anthony. You did not mind exposing her private struggle. Anthony lowered his eyes. Steve held up the article. But when the truth makes you look vulnerable, suddenly privacy matters. Anthony looked toward Elena. I never denied what she did. Sophia answered, You stopped mentioning it. Because it happened 18 years ago. The scar did not disappear 18 years ago. Anthony looked angry again. What do you want me to do? Thank her every day? Elena stared at him. No, her voice was soft but clear. I wanted you to stop punishing me for surviving differently than you did. The studio became silent. Anthony's face changed. Elena continued. You lost strength in your knee. He looked down. I lost part of the face I recognized. She touched the scar. You were allowed to be angry about what happened to you. Her voice trembled. But when I became afraid of photographs, you called me difficult. Anthony tried to speak. Elena continued. When I stopped dancing, you said I had changed. You did change. So did you. The audience reacted. Elena looked directly at him. You became embarrassed by the person who reminded you that you needed help. Anthony's mouth opened, but no words came. Steve stood between Elena and Anthony. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Brother, That scar is not evidence that your wife became less beautiful. Anthony looked at him. It is evidence that she loved her family more than she feared the fire. The audience stood. Elena began crying again. This time, she did not cover her face. Steve continued. You keep talking about the woman she was before the accident. He pointed toward Elena. But the woman after the accident raised your daughter, paid bills, supported your recovery, and helped build your business. Anthony looked toward the floor. Steve asked, did she help start your fitness center? Yes. How? She helped with the early accounts. Elena replied, and meal programs. Steve looked at her. You created programs for his clients? Yes, Sophia added. Mom's nutrition plans helped the gym attract older members. Anthony said, I never denied that. Michelle shook her head. You introduce her as your wife. You never tell people she developed half the original program. Anthony became defensive. The gym is my business. Elena looked at him. I never asked to own it. Then why are we discussing it? Because you keep acting like I became a burden after the accident. The audience became quiet. Elena continued. I helped you rebuild your body, your confidence, and your career. Anthony looked toward her, and every time you told me how much better I looked before, you made me feel like none of that mattered. Anthony's eyes filled with emotion. I did not know you felt that way. Elena laughed sadly. I told you. When? Every time I asked you to stop. The studio remained silent. Steve nodded slowly. That is the sentence people ignore until somebody says it in public. He looked at Anthony. She did not suddenly become hurt today. Today was simply the first time the rest of us saw it. Anthony wiped one eye. I thought if I joked about it she would stop being so serious. Steve shook his head. You were not helping her feel comfortable. He pointed toward Elena. You were making her responsible for your discomfort. Anthony looked confused. Steve continued. Every time you saw that scar, you remembered the accident. Anthony's jaw tightened. You remembered being trapped. Anthony looked away. You remembered needing your wife to save you. The audience was silent. And instead of dealing with that feeling, you turned the reminder into her problem. Anthony's eyes filled with tears. I did not ask her to go back. Elena looked at him. I know. You could have died. I know. Anthony's voice broke. I heard you trying to lift the dashboard. Elena stood still. For 18 years Anthony had rarely spoken about those minutes. He continued. I could smell the smoke. His hands began to shake. I kept telling you to leave me. Elena's tears fell freely. You did. You would not go. No, Anthony lowered his head. I thought I was going to watch you die because of me. Elena stepped closer but did not touch him. Anthony continued. When I saw the scar afterward, I knew it was there because you came back. The audience listened without moving. I hated myself. Elena closed her eyes. Anthony's voice grew quieter. But instead of saying that, I kept telling you how different you looked. Steve nodded. You tried to move the shame from you to her. Anthony wiped his face. Yes. Elena looked at him. That does not excuse it. No, you made me feel ugly for saving you. Anthony began crying. I know. Steve stepped back slightly. The truth had finally reached the place Anthony had protected with jokes. But Steve did not allow emotion to become an escape from accountability. Crying now does not repair 18 years. Anthony nodded. I understand. No, Steve said. You are beginning to understand. The audience reacted softly. Steve turned toward Elena. What do you want to happen right now? Elena looked surprised. She had spent years adjusting herself around Anthony's reactions. Now the decision belonged to her. She thought for several seconds. I want him to apologize without mentioning the accident as an excuse. Anthony looked at her. Elena continued. I want him to apologize for what he chose to do after it. Anthony nodded. He faced his wife. I am sorry for making your scar feel like something you needed to hide. Elena listened. I am sorry for comparing you to old photographs. His voice shook. I am sorry for calling cruelty a joke after you told me it hurt. Elena wiped her tears. Anthony continued. You saved Sophia. He looked at their daughter. You saved me. Then he looked back at Elena. And I repaid you by making the mark of that sacrifice feel shameful. The audience remained silent. I was wrong. Elena took a breath. Yes, you were. Anthony nodded. I know an apology does not fix it. It does not. What can I do? Elena answered carefully. You can stop deciding what I should look like. Anthony lowered his eyes. You can stop discussing surgery. Yes. You can stop controlling photographs. Yes. And you can go to counseling. Anthony looked at her. Together? Separately first. He seemed hurt, but he nodded. That is fair. Steve looked at Elena. You want him to remain captain? Elena looked toward the podium. Then she shook her head. No, the audience erupted. Steve smiled. What do you want? I want to finish the game as captain. Anthony stepped away without arguing. Elena moved into the front position. As she did, Sophia gently moved Elena's hair away from the right side of her face. Elena instinctively raised one hand. Sophia whispered, You do not have to. Elena looked toward the audience. Hundreds of people were standing for her. She lowered her hand. For the first time that day, the scar was fully visible. The applause became louder. Steve waited until the room settled. We still have a game to finish. The final round was worth triple points. Steve called Elena and the opposing captain to the buzzer. Name something people gain after surviving a difficult experience. Elena hit the buzzer. Strength. The bell rang. It was the number one answer. The audience exploded. The Reynolds family chose to play. Sophia answered wisdom. Michelle answered confidence. Luis answered gratitude. All three appeared on the board. Steve reached Anthony. He stood one position behind Elena now. Name something people gain after surviving a difficult experience. Anthony looked at his wife. Perspective. The answer appeared. One response remained. The family received 2 strikes. Steve returned to Elena. This answer can clear the board. Elena looked at Sophia. She looked at Anthony. Then she touched her scar. A new purpose. The bell rang. The final answer appeared. The Reynolds family won the game. Confetti filled the stage. Sophia hugged Elena. Michelle and Luis joined them. Anthony remained a few feet away. Elena looked toward him. After a moment, she allowed him to join the family embrace. She was not saying everything had been forgiven. She was saying he could participate in the work of repairing it. Elena and Sophia were selected for fast money. Sophia scored 137 points. Elena needed 63 points to win the prize. Steve stood beside her at the podium. Ready? Elena took a deep breath. Yes. Hair staying back? Elena touched it. Then she smiled. Yes, the audience applauded. The clock began. Name something people notice first in a photograph. A smile. Name something that can make a person feel beautiful. Confidence. Name someone people want beside them during an emergency. Family. Name something a survivor may carry forever. A scar. Name something more important than appearance. Character. The buzzer sounded. The audience stood. Steve looked at her. You answered those questions with your whole life. Elena smiled through tears. The results appeared. Smile earned 31 points. Confidence earned 27. Family earned 36. The Reynolds family passed 200 points. They had won $20,000. Sophia ran onto the stage and hugged her mother. Steve handed Elena the prize card. What will you do with the money? Elena looked toward Luis. Then she looked at the old newspaper article. I want to create a meal program for families recovering after serious accidents. Steve nodded. What would that look like? When a family is dealing with surgery, rehabilitation, or long hospital stays, food becomes another problem. She continued, I want to provide meals so they can focus on healing. The audience applauded. Anything for yourself? Elena smiled. I want to take dance lessons again. Sophia screamed happily. You said yes. Steve laughed. You have been discussing this? For years, Sophia said. Steve looked at Elena. Why now? Elena touched her scar. Because I kept waiting to look like the woman who used to dance. She looked toward the audience. "I think I am ready to let this woman dance." The audience rose again. After the recording ended, Elena did not immediately return to normal life. There was no normal to return to. Anthony's public insult had exposed a problem that had existed inside their marriage for years. His apology mattered. But Elena understood that regret could disappear once embarrassment faded. She wanted change that remained after the cameras stopped. Anthony began individual counseling. During the first sessions, he focused on the accident. He described the smoke. He described the pressure of the dashboard against his leg. He described hearing Elena break the rear window. He admitted that he had repeatedly dreamed about the moment she returned to the front seat. In those dreams, she never escaped. He woke feeling guilty and powerless. Instead of discussing the nightmares, Anthony became obsessed with physical control. He exercised. He built a fitness business. He transformed bodies. He told clients that discipline could improve almost anything. Elena's scar challenged that belief. It was proof that effort could not reverse every change. It was also proof that Anthony had once been completely helpless. The counselor helped him understand that he had attacked what the scar represented. He believed that if Elena changed her appearance, he might stop remembering the accident. That was why he discussed surgery. That was why he arranged photographs. That was why he compared her with her younger self. He called the behavior honesty. In reality, it was avoidance. Understanding the reason did not excuse the harm. Anthony wrote down every comment Elena remembered. The list was long. Some comments had seemed small when spoken alone. Together they revealed a pattern. He had criticized lighting. He had suggested hairstyles. He had removed photographs from social media. He had asked Elena to stand behind other relatives. He had praised old photographs in ways that made current ones feel like evidence of loss. During one counseling session, Anthony said, "I never used the word ugly." The counselor asked, did she need to hear the word to understand the message? Anthony had no answer. Elena also attended counseling. She examined why she had continued hiding the scar, even after building confidence in other parts of her life. She realized that fear of strangers was no longer the main problem. She had spoken in front of hospital staff and support groups. She had met hundreds of families. The person whose opinion affected her most was Anthony. She had kept hoping that if she looked careful enough, he would stop making comments. She chose hairstyles around him. She selected restaurant seats around him. She avoided photographs around him. Without meaning to, she had given his insecurity authority over her body. Her counselor helped her establish boundaries. Anthony was no longer allowed to comment on cosmetic procedures. He could not adjust her position in photographs. He could not show old pictures as evidence of how she used to look. If he broke those boundaries, Elena would end the conversation or leave the situation. She also told him something difficult. "I do not know whether I can remain married to someone who sees my face as a reminder of his shame." Anthony began crying. Elena did not rush to comfort him. For years she had treated his discomfort as more urgent than her own pain. Now he needed to carry the emotional consequence of his behavior. "I want to change," he said. "Then change because it is right. I want you to stay. That cannot be your only reason." Anthony nodded. He understood. The episode aired several months later. The response was immediate. Millions of viewers watched Steve hold up the newspaper article. The phrase "the scar she got saving us" spread across social media. People shared photographs of scars left by accidents, surgeries, burns, cancer treatment, childbirth, military service, and medical emergencies. Many used the same message: "This is not an imperfection. It is part of my survival." Women wrote to Elena about partners who compared them with younger photographs. Some described being criticized after cancer surgery. Others said their spouses mocked weight changes caused by medication, pregnancy, disability, or age. Men also responded. Several admitted that they had disguised cruel observations as honesty. One husband wrote that he had apologized to his wife for years of comments about her surgical scar. Another said he removed a social media post comparing his wife's appearance before and after childbirth. Elena's community food organization received a flood of donations. Using the prize money and public support, Elena launched a program called Meals After the Storm. The program delivered meals to families recovering from serious accidents, burns, and emergency surgeries. Volunteers prepared food. Local restaurants donated supplies. Hospitals referred families who needed help. Within its first year, Meals After the Storm served more than 6,000 meals. Elena insisted that every delivery include a simple note: healing does not have to look perfect to be real. She also began speaking more openly about visible scars. At one hospital event, Elena stood before a group of patients preparing to return home after reconstructive surgery. She wore her hair pulled back. Her scar was fully visible. "I spent years waiting to recognize the woman in the mirror," she told them. She touched her face. "Then I realized I was looking for the wrong woman." The room became quiet. The woman from before the accident did not know she could break a window, enter smoke, and pull two people towards safety. Several patients began crying. "I do not want to lose who I was." Elena smiled. "But I no longer believe survival requires me to become her again." Sophia attended many events with her. She began studying emergency management in college. The accident had shaped her life even though she remembered very little of it. She wanted to help communities prepare for disasters and support families after them. During one interview, a reporter asked Sophia whether she thought of her mother as a hero. Sophia answered carefully, "My mother does not need to be perfect to be heroic." She continued, "She was afraid. She was injured. She struggled afterward. Courage does not mean none of those things happened." Elena saved the interview. Anthony's fitness centers also changed. For years, the advertising had focused heavily on dramatic physical transformations. Anthony began reconsidering the message. He met with disability advocates, rehabilitation professionals, and older clients. The gyms created new programs for people rebuilding strength after injury or surgery. The advertisements stopped using language that suggested one type of body was superior. One campaign featured clients with scars, prosthetic limbs, mobility aids, and other visible differences. The slogan read, "Strength has more than one look." Anthony did not place himself at the center of the campaign. He understood that the change was not his redemption story, it was part of his responsibility. Before using Elena's photograph, the marketing team asked her directly. She declined at first. "I do not want my face used to repair your image." Anthony accepted the answer. He did not pressure her. 6 months later, Elena changed her mind. She agreed to appear only if the campaign promoted Meals After the Storm and included other survivors. Her photograph showed her smiling with her hair pulled back. Anthony stood nowhere in the image. The decision was hers. That difference mattered. Anthony also told his employees the full truth about the fitness center's early years. At a company meeting, he said, "Elena's salary kept our household stable while this business lost money." He explained that she had developed the original nutrition plans. He added her name to the company's history page as an early program contributor. Elena did not request ownership or a title. She wanted the story corrected. Anthony corrected it. Their marriage remained uncertain for several months. Some days felt hopeful. Other days brought old pain back. Once, during a family photograph, Anthony instinctively said, "Maybe stand on." He stopped himself. Elena looked at him. Anthony apologized immediately. He did not say he was only trying to help. He did not call her sensitive. He simply moved where the photographer asked him to stand. Small moments revealed whether the change was real. A year after the episode, Elena and Anthony returned to Family Feud for a follow-up segment. Steve stood at center stage while a video showed Meals After the Storm. The audience saw volunteers filling containers. They saw food delivered to a family whose father was recovering from burns. They saw Elena speaking to patients at a hospital. They saw Sophia studying emergency response. The final image showed Elena dancing at a community event. Her hair was pulled away from her face. When the video ended, Elena walked onto the stage in a bright red dress. The audience stood. Steve smiled. "Look at you." Elena laughed. "I started dancing again. I saw that. It took a few lessons. Did you still know the moves? My mind did. My feet needed reminders." The audience laughed. Steve hugged her. Then Anthony walked onto the stage. He stood beside her but did not take her hand until she reached for his. Steve noticed. "How are you doing?" he asked Anthony. "I am learning to see without judging." Steve nodded. "What does that mean?" Anthony looked toward Elena. "For years I saw her scar and thought about what the accident took from us." His voice became emotional. "Now I try to remember what her courage gave us." He looked toward Sophia in the audience. A daughter who grew up. Then he looked back at Elena. "A life I almost lost." The audience applauded. Steve asked, "What did you regret most after watching the episode?" Anthony took a breath. "I regretted seeing her cover her face." The studio became quiet. She had spent years learning not to hide from strangers. He continued, "And I was the reason she still hid at home." Elena's eyes filled with tears. Anthony looked toward the camera. "I thought because I loved my wife, my intentions mattered more than the effect of my words." He shook his head. "They did not." Steve turned toward Elena. "What did you learn?" Elena touched the right side of her face. "I learned that confidence is not never feeling insecure." She looked at the audience. "It is deciding that insecurity will not choose your life." The audience applauded. "I also learned that forgiveness and access are not the same thing." Steve raised an eyebrow. "Explain that." "You may forgive someone and still require them to earn their way back into the places they damaged." Anthony nodded. Elena continued, "Trust is not restored because the person feels sorry. It is restored when their behavior becomes safe." The audience stood again. Steve looked directly into the main camera. "Everybody's appearance changes." He spoke slowly. "Age changes it. Illness changes it. Children change it. Work changes it. Accidents change it." He pointed toward Elena. "But character is revealed by how we treat somebody when life changes what we expected to see." The studio became completely silent. "A person who loves you should not make the mirror harder to face." Elena wiped away a tear. Steve continued, "Your spouse should not compare you with an old photograph as if your younger self is competition." He looked toward Anthony. "And when somebody carries a scar from saving your life, you do not hide it." He looked toward Elena. "You honor it." The audience rose for a final standing ovation. Elena stood beneath the bright studio lights. The scar was visible. So was her smile. For years, Anthony had treated those two things as if they could not exist together. He had been wrong. Elena was not beautiful despite what had happened. Her beauty could not be separated into a before and an after. It existed in the young woman who danced with confidence. It existed in the injured mother who broke a window. It existed in the wife who returned to a burning car. It existed in the survivor who struggled to recognize herself. And it existed in the woman who finally stopped arranging her body around another person's discomfort. Anthony had insulted her appearance in front of everyone. Steve made him regret it by revealing what he had refused to see. The scar was not evidence that Elena had lost something valuable. It was evidence that when the people she loved were trapped, she did not abandon them. Years later, Elena finally demanded the same loyalty from herself. She stopped abandoning the woman in the mirror.